In my last video, I talked about why animation is a medium that any age group can enjoy and not a genre meant to entertain just children. So it only stands to reason that in the video right after that, we talk about a hypothetical follow-up to a massively popular recent animated quote-unquote kids film, right? Right? Anyways, I think it's fair to say that Encanto has clearly become one of, if not the best animated film of 2021, and easily one of, if not the best 3D animated film from Walt Disney Animation Studios ever. It's also officially my favorite 3D animated film ever, though the reason why is a whole nother can of worms for another day.
Spoilers!
Regardless, having been on Twitter a lot the past few months, it's been somewhat hard to wander the animation category without fans of the film asking for more from this dysfunctionally functional magical family. Not to mention that Jared Bush himself, a writer and director of the film, has stated on Twitter that he wants to tell more stories from this family. Knowing how big of a film it's become and how many people want more from this universe, including the aforementioned writer and director, I seriously doubt that Disney isn't considering making more content in this universe. Money is what drives business after all, and there is clearly money to be made here.
Hello, I like money.
What that content is, however, remains to be seen. But I think it's actually quite possible that a series might be the route Disney takes, mainly because they've already done it before with the spin-off series Tangled the Series, Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure, and Big Hero 6 the series. So let's say that this is their route. What could they possibly do? Well, I think I have a great way that they can not only continue the story, but satisfy the fandom while also staying true to the source material all at the same time. But hey, baby steps. Let's start at the beginning. TV shows come in many forms, but animated series usually come in two half-hour forms. A single 20 to 25 minute story, think series like the aforementioned spin-off series and Gravity Falls, or two 10 to 12 minute mini-stories combined into one single episode. Think series like Phineas and Ferb, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, and Wander Over Yonder. And while there's potential for both, this is actually an easy decision for me. Like I said, both of their previously mentioned spin-off series are the former single story format, and that's for a good reason. It allows for more fleshed out stories with multiple moving parts. And since it's a tried and true format for Walt Disney Animation Studios spin-offs, I think it's almost assuredly the way Disney would want to go. Plus, it makes it feel less like a series specifically for kids than the split format does, hence why it's used by shows such as Rick and Morty. That then begs the question, okay, we're doing half-hour episodes that are a single story each, but how are they animated? And this really is the million-dollar question, in some ways literally, because it decides how many episodes we will get in the season. And while I think that everyone would love to see the same 3D animation and lighting, myself included, it's just impractical and expensive, probably costing as much as the film, if not more, just to do 6 half-hour episodes. And while it's possible, I seriously doubt a good series story could be accomplished in that time. So let's do a 2D style similar to what was done with the Tangled and Big Hero 6 spin-offs to keep costs down while also allowing for the most possible episodes to keep the series at an ideal length. Note that I said similar because the art styles of those two shows just probably wouldn't work here. I mean, they could, but I think it's a bit too cartoony to do the Encanto character designs justice, considering that they've already done animation tests for characters like Mirabel in a more classic Disney 2D, and it looked really good. I actually think the style that they use in one of their official Trends International posters could possibly work, though it would definitely need some tweaking. At the end of the day, though, I don't think that people will care so long as it looks good and keeps the cheery brightness of the colors from the 3D film. As long as it's appropriate story-wise, of course. Finally, we come to the thing animation would most help decide, the length of the seasons. This is the easiest question to answer. Since we're doing a cheaper and simpler 2D style with 30-minute episodes, we can assume that it would be a full 20 to 25 episode season. Like I said before, I think the shorter series formats used in series like Marvel's Disney Plus exclusives, and probably the future Moana series if we're being honest, just seems too short in this format to tell a good story. Not to mention that people have wanted more interactions with every member of the family, and such a long series gives every family member not only a chance to have their own dedicated episode or episodes, but also gives us a chance to highlight and focus on some of the townsfolk for an episode or two, should there be a good story idea there. Okay, that was the easy part of this video. Now let's dig into the nitty-gritty. So something that is important in a series is to have a story that starts in the first episode and follows through to the end of either the entire series or at least the end of that particular season. This is the primary or the A story. As an example, Once Upon a Time starts with Emma Swan getting tracked down by her son, Henry. She doesn't believe he is her son or that there is an actual curse over the town, But as the first season goes on, she starts to realize that not only is Henry her actual son, which happens pretty early on if I recall correctly, but that there is in fact a curse on the town and her parents are actually Snow White and Prince Charming. But during the season, the episodes focus on the larger story while also detouring to do their own things and explore smaller side stories, often called B stories. This pattern of side plots grows as the series goes on, but the series always focuses on Emma in some way, shape, or form, until of course it doesn't in the final season. But we don't talk about Emma! I'm sorry. Anyways, we need an overarching story, but we shouldn't rely on that alone to carry the show. So I think having each episode focus on one character, or a group of them like I previously mentioned, would be a good way to get our episodic stories while also helping to drive the primary story forward. Additionally, I think there should be some songs placed in heavier hitting parts of the story, similar to how Tangled's spin-off does them. I do think the songs should be limited to the more emotional moments, however, as that is how they are often used in the movie for the most part, and in musical theater in general. And if anyone is going to write songs for it, I think it's only appropriate to give Lin-Manuel Miranda the opportunity since he did the songs for the movie and look what happened there. So we know what our episodes are going to focus on and what they may or may not contain based on the context and emotions of that episode, but what exactly could we do for the primary story? Well, I have an idea, and I think it works extremely well given what we know about the characters and the story in general. So let's backpedal to the actual film of Encanto for a minute. It's not explicitly given to us, but it's pretty safe to assume that the intention of the magic not giving a gift to Mirabel was that she would one day become the family matriarch and would take over the leadership role in both the house and the Encanto, with the magic also transitioning to belong to her over time, since Abuela can't live forever. My evidence? Howard Ho did a video about Dos Oruguitas where he mentioned that Lin-Manuel Miranda, a writer of the film, loves to play chess and treats his songwriting as such. And Miranda himself watched that video and commented on Howard's idea of Mirabel being a, quote, new queen on the board at the end of the story, and said that he loved it, so I'm almost certain that was the intention. There might be better evidence, but I can't remember. So what if we continue that idea forward with the series' primary overarching story? Here's my idea. At the end of the film, spoiler warning in case you haven't seen that yet, in which case I have to ask, why are you watching this video? Anyways, at the end of the film, the house and the magic are completely destroyed and gone. After Abuela and Mirabel reconcile, the house is rebuilt with the help of the town without magic. The family gives Mirabel a doorknob to finish the house and open the front door as a symbol of their acceptance of her for who she is. When she inserts the knob, the magic comes flooding back, but it's different. Don't believe me? Read the screenplay. It's stated right there that this is a new magic. So what if the magic is now 100% Mirabel's right away with zero attachment or control from Abuela? This actually makes some sense since Jared Bush himself said on Twitter that there are two magics. Abuela's, a flame-colored magic imbued in the candle, and Mirabel's, a non-specific colored magic embedded in the house but most shown in the front door. Plus the front door shows Mirabel front and center with every other member of the family, not just her. So it's not her own door if you want to be technical. And that brings me back to the smooth transition of power I mentioned earlier. What if this event in the film resulted in the transfer of the magic from Abuela being instant and immediate instead of smooth and more natural? This would give us a logical and interesting conflict point for the primary story arc. Mirabel, at 15 years of age, is, at least according to the magic, now responsible for leading the family. Or, to be more blunt, Mirabel, who isn't prepared for it, is now quite literally the matriarch of the Madrigal family, and to an extent, the rest of the Madrigals aren't ready for a new matriarch either. This actually works pretty well. The series can have the main story be about Mirabel trying to learn the ropes of leadership, both in terms of leading the family and in terms of leading the entire Encanto in the longer run, with the smaller episodic stories being used to further Mirabel's knowledge and experience in that leadership. This actually would move Abuela to the leader of the Encanto only and a mentor figure for Mirabel due to the unexpected transfer. Abuela, over the course of the show, can show Mirabel the ropes of leadership and what to do when things go wrong. Additionally, Mirabel may also have some influence on the way Abuela and the others see the family and the Encanto as a whole. This is probably the most contentious part of this entire concept, but you can tell me your thoughts in the comments below. For now, however, let's just roll with it. Every show, good or bad, needs a title. So, no reason to leave that out of this video. We came this far after all, so we might as well finish it. So, show titles are usually reminiscent of their themes or contents. For example, Once Upon a Time is about fairy tale characters stuck in our world rather than their own, Big Hero 6 the series is a follow-up series to the film Big Hero 6, Phineas and Ferb is sort of about the brothers Phineas and Ferb and their contraption antics, and Steven Universe is about a boy named Steven Universe who fights alongside living gems in a galactic war. So, since the film is a follow-up to Encanto, should we call it Encanto the series? Well, while I do think that's what Disney would call it, I think it's a bit wrong. For one, you're combining Spanish and English words, which is a recipe for trouble, and that's not even mentioning the general lameness of the title in general. So, in an effort to be more creative and not lame, I gave it some thought, and I think there's a title that would fit almost perfectly. Introducing, for your naming pleasure, drumroll please, La Familia Madrigal. I actually really like this title. For one, it sticks with the Spanish naming of the film while also being easy enough to understand what it means without the need for translation. Plus, it clearly conveys that it's a show about the Madrigal family. And just to add icing on an already delectable cake, we've heard this exact line spoken by the characters in the film itself, both in Spanish and in English.
La familia Madrigal.
La familia Madrigal.
So we've solidified the primary overarching story and a solid show name. But what about the smaller sub-stories in the show? Well, let's discuss some episode ideas I had. Note that I seriously doubt all of them could be used, but most, especially the first one, could be. Regardless, let's talk about them. Let's start with episode 1, traditionally called the pilot episode, and I think it should start right where the film leaves off. Since this is the first episode, it works mainly to get the ball rolling on the primary story. Basically, the episode is the discovery of the new magic and that Mirabel is the new matriarch. Each family member gets a chance to rebind to their doors, with Mirabel getting Abuela's when the door doesn't react to Abuela. I think Mirabel should get Abuela's room instead, because it means Mirabel finally gets her own door, which makes sense, since she probably would have gotten Abuela's door once she passed away anyway, and since we are in a, quote, accelerated timeline of sorts, it just works. On the surface, it does undermine the whole house is her room thing, but I disagree because the house used to be Abuela's and she still got a room. I actually wrote a much more detailed concept of this episode if you'd like to know more and see my more detailed ideas about it. I'll leave a link to that document in the description. Since it was confirmed by Jared Bush that both Felix's and Augustine's parents, and probably their siblings as well, live in the Encanto, I figured it would be cool to interact with the other family members of Felix and Augustine. I think it would be funny if everyone else in Augustine's family was an extremely lucky person in bad situations to completely contrast him and make him stand out, which would also help the bond between him and Mirabel as, quote, fishes out of water. As for Felix, I think a family of emotionally stable farmers would be funny as a comparison to Pepa. Again, both just random concepts that came to mind. There are probably better character examples, I just can't think of them right now. What I do think might make it more interesting, however, is if those two particular families aren't exactly on good terms with each other for some reason. These episodes would then help to push the main story forward by assisting Mirabel with learning to manage tense and delicate situations and problems. So I thought it would be fun to have an episode dedicated to a soccer match between the two primary sides of the family. Yes, I know it's called football in most of the world, including Colombia, but I'm American and we say soccer. Obviously it would be called football in the series, but for the sake of this video, I'd rather just say what I'm used to. Fight me! Typically, teams are 11 players each, but a 5 versus 5 match between Julieta and Pepa's sides of the family would be interesting to see, I think, especially considering most of them have powers that would keep it semi-balanced. Antonio and his animals, with Camilo and his shapeshifting, might actually be pretty balanced against Isabella's plant control and Luisa's sheer strength. The other 3 on each team either have gifts that are pretty useless in soccer, or don't have gifts at all. I kind of picture a Mario Strikers-esque match, and it also gives us a chance to use a line from Encanto's gag reel.
Foul play, Casita. Yellow card, Casita, yellow card.
These episodes can serve the main story by being a way to undo tension within the family itself, or maybe settle an argument. Considering Isabella and Dolores are less than a month apart in age, maybe they're arguing who is better. I don't know. The only issue is that soccer wasn't introduced into Colombia until 1918, long after the Encanto's canonical creation, so some other event would have to give them the idea. For example, maybe an outsider arrives to the Encanto for the first time ever. Actually, speaking of that. So I'm pretty sure it's a pretty well-known fact that the Encanto's mountains aren't really protecting them anymore, as it isn't really necessary. Not to mention that there's a giant crack in the mountains. So what if someone wanders in from outside? How would the family members react? How would the community react? Who would this outsider even be? Well, first of all, I think it would be interesting for the outsider to be a musician of some kind. I also think having Lin-Manuel Miranda voice that character would be pretty cool as well, since he is also a talented voice actor. This would be a bit of a contentious episode, and I think it would help teach Mirabel about handling unexpected situations and calming large groups of people down. Inspired by a comment from Throwaway Pros on the Encanto subreddit. Considering how strained the familial relations were during the film and how long those kinds of bonds can take to repair, I actually like the idea of them all getting together and having a big sleepover, primarily the 6 grandchildren. What room it would be in would probably be up for debate, but Isabella's room is the obvious choice since it's all about plants, and since Isabella controls said plants, making soft beds out of them isn't entirely out of the question. This gives a genuine bonding opportunity for the grandchildren while also giving a bit of a break from the standard routine of work. Just because Abuela is no longer in charge doesn't mean that they can't continue serving the community after all. It would also work as a form of story time for the characters and give them a chance to talk about the past and reconcile problems or situations from said past. While we are here, let's also throw in a jokey reference about how Luisa shared the nursery with Isabella, Dolores, Camilo, and Mirabel at one time or another, so such a sleepover is bringing back some old memories she had completely forgotten about. Inspired by comments from This Does Not Look Safe and Jacerat from the Encanto subreddit. While I don't necessarily think the person the Reddit users proposed is the right one, I do like the general idea. Maybe Dolores overheard someone talking to a friend about how they are interested in Luisa and decides to play matchmaker? I think Dolores roping Mirabel and Isabella into trying to help her would actually be funny given the end of the film and their relation to Luisa. Additionally, I think Isabella would want to be very careful about playing matchmaker, as she has been on the receiving end of someone who's a bit too pushy with their matchmaking and thus wouldn't want to push the same problem onto her sister. I also love the idea that Luisa is just completely oblivious to any and all flirtatious comments made towards her, and while that was also from the subreddit, I genuinely can't remember who said that or when they said it, so I apologize in advance to them. Inspired by a post from Broken Dreams and Glass on the Encanto subreddit. I feel like I'm taking too many ideas from the r/Encanto subreddit, but they are all really good ideas. The user Broken Dreams and Glass actually wrote an almost perfect idea for an episode, so I won't really elaborate more. I will add that I think this would be one of the first episodes in the series, probably somewhere between episode 5 and 10, because it is a plot thread that needs to be resolved sooner rather than later. I think an episode flashing back to see what kind of chaos occurs when Pippa or Julieta gets sick would be interesting. The former because being sick would probably wreak havoc on the weather, and the latter because I think it would be interesting to see what happens when the healer gets sick and can't possibly heal. This is more of a comic relief episode, but I think teasing it in episodes prior, similar to how they teased the llama incident in Milo Murphy's Law, would be absolutely amazing. Okay, this episode is self-explanatory. We know how Julieta and Augustine met, but being able to actually see it play out would be interesting. As for Pepe and Felix, we can only really guess at this point, so it would be cool to see how they came together. Alternatively, these could even be flashback scenes in the Luisa Admirer episode to help with the situation, especially if they get frustrated if Luisa is oblivious to the situation. I'm not entirely sure how this could help the primary story, but it could act as more of an intriguing comedic episode that in canon acts as a stress relief break for Mirabel. Because honestly, we all need a break from time to time, hence why God rested on the 7th day. So, obviously we won't know what will happen with the characters or story, if anything, until we hear it from Disney themselves. However, if I had to wager a guess, I think what we might get next would be something like this. The title would be La Familia Madrigal. It would be a long-form series, 20 to 25 episodes in length, animated in a 2D art style. The A story would be about Mirabel learning to be the new matriarch of the family, which makes her responsible for keeping the family functional while also balancing her own personal life and learning to lead an entire community of people. The B stories would be episode-length mini-stories about specific characters and their own adventures and struggles, with most of them helping to push Mirabel's story as the matriarch forward. Well, what do you guys think? Is this how Disney should go forward, or is there a better format or story that can be told? Let me know down in the comments below. I'm always open to courteous, respectful discussion. And while you're down there, remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Well, I'm pretty sure that's all for me today. Remember, Jesus loves you. God bless. Until next time, peace out, Finnegan Squad.